I'm Novalie Quinn, and at 19, I stood in a Chicago hospital room, watching my family walk away from the one person who held us together. They left my grandfather to die because saving him cost too much. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky outside the hospital window looked bruised, heavy with rain that wouldn't fall. The doctor's voice was flat, like he'd said it 1,000 times before. The treatment will cost upwards of $250,000, less than a 10% chance he'll pull through. My mother didn't flinch. My uncle didn't blink. My cousin, in his press suit, just checked his phone. Then my mother spoke, her words sharp as a scalpel. "He's 84. He's had his time. We're not bankrupting ourselves for a lost cause." They turned and left, their footsteps echoing down the sterile hallway. I stood frozen, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, my backpack heavy with college textbooks I'd never open again. I was 19, with $15,000 in a savings account I'd scraped together from waitressing and tutoring. That money was my ticket out, a community college degree, a shot at something better than the cramped South Side apartment I'd grown up in. But as the elevator doors closed behind them, I knew I couldn't leave him. Not like they did. He wasn't just an old man in a hospital bed. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike when my mother was too busy, who slipped me candy when I failed my first math test, who told me I could be more than the chaos I was born into. And now, he was alone, hooked to machines that beeped like a countdown. I couldn't let him wake up to an empty room, wondering why no one cared enough to stay. The nurse handed me a stack of forms, her eyes soft with pity. "Someone needs to sign for his care. Insurance won't cover much." My hands shook as I scrawled my name, signing away my future, my savings, my everything. I didn't know how I'd pay for it. I didn't know if he'd even survive the week. But I knew one thing. They'd left behind more than a sick man. They'd left behind a secret. Something Grandpa whispered about in his fevered sleep. Something about a betrayal that broke his heart long before his body started to fail. That secret kept me up at night, wondering what my family was hiding, what they'd done to him decades ago. It was a puzzle I couldn't solve yet, but it fueled me. I took a job slinging trays in the hospital cafeteria, the kind of work that left grease on your skin and aches in your bones. I stayed by his bedside every night, holding his hand, praying he'd open his eyes. And when he did, I'd learned something that would change everything. Not just about him, but about the family who thought they could erase us both. What happened next wasn't just a fight for his life. It was a fight for mine, for the truth, for a legacy they never saw coming. Stick around to see how a 19-year-old girl turned their betrayal into something unstoppable. And if you want to catch every twist of this story, hit that subscribe button for the latest videos. You won't want to miss what's coming. The hospital cafeteria smelled of burnt coffee and bleach. I slung trays across the counter, my hands sticky from spilled syrup, my back aching from 8-hour shifts. $15,000, every penny I'd saved for college, vanished into the hospital's ledger. The financial officer's pen scratched as I signed forms, each signature heavier than the last. My mother's last words echoed in my head. "You're on your own now, Novalie." She'd cut me off, canceled my phone plan, drained the joint account I trusted her to manage. I was 19, alone, and drowning in debt for a man the doctors swore wouldn't last the week. But I couldn't walk away, not when Grandpa's hand felt so frail in mine. The cafeteria job paid barely enough to cover rent on my shoebox apartment. Nights were spent at his bedside, watching machines blink red and green, their hum a constant reminder of time slipping away. One evening, while sorting his belongings, I found an envelope tucked inside his old leather wallet. Yellowed, edges frayed, It was addressed to me in his sharp, slanted handwriting. I hesitated, heart pounding, then slid it open. Inside was a single page dated 20 years ago, hinting at a betrayal, a family theft that had gutted his first business. They took everything and left me to rebuild alone. The words burned, a secret that explained why he never spoke of my mother's childhood. I stuffed the letter back, my mind racing. Who had stolen from him? My mother? My uncle? The questions gnawed at me, but I had no time to chase answers. Grandpa's breathing was shallow, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. I whispered to him, promising I'd stay, even as fear clawed at my chest. The hospital bills piled up, each one a brick on my shoulders. My coworkers, kind but wary, slipped me extra shifts, sensing I was fighting for more than just money. One night, a nurse caught me crying in the break room. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a coffee and said, "You're stronger than you know." I didn't feel strong. I felt like a kid playing adult, signing forms I barely understood, praying for a miracle I couldn't afford. But that letter, it was a spark in the dark. It wasn't just a clue to their greed. It was proof Grandpa had trusted me with something no one else knew. I started noticing things in his fevered murmurs. Names, dates, a business called Quintech he'd never mentioned before. Each word was a thread, pulling me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. My family hadn't just abandoned him now. They'd betrayed him decades ago. I kept working, kept watching, kept holding his hand. The cafeteria trays grew heavier, the nights longer. But that letter gave me purpose. It wasn't just about saving him anymore. It was about uncovering what they'd done, why they thought they could erase him again. The hospital clock ticked louder each day, counting down to a moment I couldn't predict. Would he wake up? Would I learn the truth? Stick around to see how this secret unraveled and changed everything. Hit that subscribe button to catch the next part of this story. You won't believe what's coming. The hospital room felt smaller each day, the air thick with antiseptic and hope. Grandpa's fingers twitched one morning, a faint sign he wasn't giving up. I sat by his bed, reading aloud from a dog-eared coding manual I'd found in the hospital's donation bin. My voice cracked, but I kept going, filling the silence with words he might not hear. His eyelids fluttered on day 5, a flicker of life that made my heart leap. The doctors warned me not to get my hopes up. Recovery was a long shot. But I saw it in his grip, stronger when I squeezed his hand. I whispered his favorite joke about burnt toast, hoping he'd scowl like he used to. One night, his breathing hitched, machines screaming in the dark. I bolted upright, my chair scraping the floor, panic choking me. The nurses rushed in, their faces grim as they adjusted tubes and checked monitors. They called it a close call, a near relapse that could have ended everything. I didn't sleep that night, my eyes locked on his chest, counting each rise and fall. The letter from his wallet haunted me, its words a puzzle I couldn't solve. The next evening he opened his eyes, just for a moment. "Novalie, you're still here," he rasped, his voice like gravel. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. "Always," I said, my voice barely a whisper, afraid to break the moment. He drifted back to sleep, but those words were a lifeline. I clung to them even as the hospital bills stacked higher, relentless. During a break in the cafeteria, I reread the letter, its ink faded but its weight heavy. Grandpa had written about Quintech, a business stolen from him in the 80s. My mother's name appeared in the margins, circled with a question mark. Had she been part of it? My uncle? My cousin? The betrayal felt alive, a shadow that explained their coldness in that hallway. They hadn't just abandoned him, they'd robbed him long before I was born. I started listening closer to his murmurs, catching fragments of the past. "They sold it," he mumbled once. "Took the patents, left me nothing." My stomach twisted, anger mixing with grief. I wanted to confront them, but I had no proof, just a letter and a sick man's whispers. The next day I brought him hospital coffee, weak and bitter. He sipped it, grimaced, and muttered, "Tastes like regret." I laughed, the sound startling in the quiet room. It was the first time I'd felt joy since they'd walked away. His recovery crept forward, slow but stubborn, like a plant breaking through concrete. He started speaking more, short sentences about circuits and code. The doctors called it a fluke, a statistical outlier. I called it him fighting for me, just as I fought for him. But that letter kept me awake, its secrets of fire in my chest. What had they taken? Why had he hidden it so long? Each day, I watched him grow stronger, but the truth felt closer too. I knew it would change everything, not just for me, but for them. The hospital clock kept ticking, counting down to something bigger than his recovery. What was coming would shake the ground beneath us all. The Chicago apartment smelled of damp plaster and old coffee. Our new home was a third-floor walk-up with a radiator that hissed like an angry cat. Grandpa's hospital bed was gone, replaced by a creaky cot in a corner. He was home now, weak but alive, his eyes brighter each day. I balanced cafeteria shifts with online GED classes, my laptop screen flickering in the dim kitchen. Sleep was a luxury, stolen in bursts between work and study. Grandpa watched me from his armchair, his hands steady as he showed me how to code. "Start simple," he said, sketching a basic program on a napkin. His lessons weren't just about ones and zeros. They were about seeing patterns, fixing what was broken, building something that lasted. One evening, he handed me a soldering iron, its tip glowing like a tiny star. We rebuilt a neighbor's busted radio, wires tangling like a puzzle. The neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, knocked the next day, her toaster dead in her arms. "You fixed my radio," she said. "Can you save this?" I hesitated, my hands still clumsy with tools. But Grandpa nodded, guiding me through each wire, each connection, until the toaster hummed again. Mrs. Delgado spread the word, her voice carrying through the building's thin walls. Soon, tenants lined up clutching broken clocks, lamps, even a kid's toy drone. We work in our cramped kitchen, the cable a mess of circuit boards and coffee mugs. Grandpa's smile grew wider with each fix, his strength returning. I saw it in his posture, the way he sat straighter, teaching me to debug code. "You're not just fixing things," he said. "You're giving them life." The repair money went into a tin can labeled Future. It wasn't much, but it kept the lights on, kept us together. One night, I found another note in his wallet, tucked behind the first. Quintech wasn't just a business, it was my heart. My chest tightened, the betrayal clearer now. My family had stolen his first company, sold his patents, left him to start over. I wanted to ask him about it, but his cough stopped me, sharp and brittle. He waved it off, but fear flickered in my gut. The apartment's walls seemed to close in, the city's hum outside a reminder of time running out. I worked faster, coded better, driven by his faith in me. Mrs. Delgado brought us empanadas one evening, her eyes warm. "You're good people," she said, and I felt a pride I hadn't known before. Our side hustle grew, neighbors calling us the Fix-It Duo. I started writing small programs to automate repairs, streamlining our work. But the note haunted me, a shadow over every line of code. What else had my family hidden? What were they capable of now? Grandpa sensed my unease, his hand steady on mine. "Keep building, Novalie," he said. "They can't take what you create." His words were a shield, but I felt a storm coming. The family's silence wasn't peace, it was a pause, a gathering of greed. Each fixed device, each line of code felt like a step towards something bigger. I just didn't know how close we were to a reckoning. The Chicago winter bit at my knuckles as I typed, my laptop balanced on a wobbly kitchen table. Our apartment's radiator groaned, barely keeping the cold at bay. I'd passed my GED exams, the certificate arriving in a plain envelope, proof I'd clawed my way forward. Grandpa framed it, his hands trembling but proud, hanging it beside his old radio schematics. I enrolled in the coding boot camp, a 6-month program for women in tech, held in a community center downtown. The first day, I felt like an imposter, surrounded by women who seemed to know more, dream bigger. But Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, "Code your own path, Novalie." I dove in, learning Python, debugging late into the night, my screen's glow my only light. A repair hustle grew, neighbors dropping off broken gadgets like offerings. The tin can labeled future overflowed, enough to cover rent and a secondhand laptop. Grandpa taught me to write algorithms for automation, his eyes bright as he sketched logic flows. You're not just coding, you're building freedom. I felt it, that spark of possibility, each line of code a brick in a wall against my family's shadow. But their silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, waiting. One night, my phone buzzed, a number I hadn't seen in months. My cousin's voice slithered through, sharp and cold like ice on pavement. "We heard about your little repair shop," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "You're playing with fire, using Grandpa's ideas." My stomach churned, the letters, words flashing in my mind. Quintech, stolen, betrayed. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. He laughed, a sound that cut deeper than words. "Stop pretending you're something you're not, or we'll make sure you do." The call ended, but the threat lingered, a weight heavier than hospital bills. I stared at Grandpa, asleep in his armchair, unaware of the storm brewing. I didn't tell him about the call, couldn't bear to dim his pride. Instead, I coded faster, my fingers flying, building programs to streamline our repairs. The boot camp instructor noticed, pulling me aside after class. "You've got a knack for this." She handed me a flyer for a tech showcase. I entered a project, a simple app to track appliance repairs, built from Grandpa's lessons. It won second place, a small grant, enough to buy better tools. The neighborhood buzzed with our story, the fix-it duo, the girl who wouldn't quit. But that call haunted me, a reminder they were watching, waiting. I found another note in Grandpa's wallet, tucked behind the others, dated a year before I was born. "They sold my patents for pennies," it read, and called it family. My anger flared, hot and sharp, but I buried it. I had to focus on coding, on Grandpa, on the life we were building from scraps. The boot camp ended and I landed a freelance gig, writing code for a local startup. It wasn't much, but it felt like a door I'd built myself, just like he'd said. But that call wasn't the last I'd hear from them. I knew they were circling, smelling success, ready to claim what they'd abandoned. Each night, I checked the locks, not just on the door, but on my resolve. They'd left us once, but I'd make sure they couldn't take what we'd built. The city's pulse thrummed outside, a rhythm of survival. Something bigger was coming, a clash I couldn't avoid, rooted in secrets I was only beginning to unravel. The Chicago summer hung heavy, our apartment's single fan buzzing like a tired insect. Grandpa and I worked in the garage, a concrete box littered with wires and dreams. We were building SafePath, a wearable device to monitor heart rates and vitals for the elderly. It started as a sketch on a greasy pizza box, born from his hospital scares. His hands, still steady despite his cough, guided mine as we soldered circuits. He said, "Make it simple. Make it save someone." I coded late into the night, my laptop glowing, algorithms weaving a safety net for others. Each line felt like a promise, a way to protect what we'd almost lost. Our neighbors tested early prototypes, their wrists adorned with our clunky, hopeful devices. Mrs. Delgado cried when hers alerted her son to a racing pulse. Word spread, and a local clinic offered a $5,000 grant to refine SafePath. We bought better sensors, a secondhand 3D printer, and kept going. Grandpa's eyes lit up when we powered up the first working model. He said, "This is it, Novalie," his voice thick with pride. I felt it too, a fire in my chest, not just for him, but for every person we might help. SafePath wasn't just tech, it was us, unbreakable. But then the letter came, delivered by a courier who wouldn't meet my eyes. A cease and desist stamped with my uncle's law firm's logo, cold and official. They claimed SafePath's patents echoed Quintech, the company they'd stolen from Grandpa decades ago. They demanded I stop production or face a lawsuit. My hands shook as I read it, the garage's dim light casting shadows on the page. They weren't just after money. They wanted to erase us again. I showed Grandpa the letter, expecting anger, but he just sighed. "They've always been scavengers," he said, his voice heavy but calm. He pulled out a notebook, its pages yellowed, filled with Quintech's original designs. He said, "This proves SafePath is mine, but they'll fight dirty." I stared at the notebook. It sketches a mirror of our work, a lifeline to the truth. My family had sold his ideas, left him broke, and now they wanted mine. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with code and fear. The letter wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. We kept working, testing SafePath in secret, hiding prototypes in a locked toolbox. A second clinic signed on, then a third, each contract a small victory. The media caught wind, a local blog calling me Chicago's garage genius. I didn't feel like a genius, just a girl fighting to keep what we'd built. Grandpa became our advisor, his cough worse, but his mind sharp. He'd sit in the garage, sketching improvements, joking about my terrible coffee. One evening, a reporter came, her camera flashing as she filmed our cluttered workspace. "You're changing lives," she said, and I believed her, for a moment. But the letter's shadow loomed, my cousin's voice from that call echoing, "You're playing with fire." I knew they'd come for more than patents soon. I found another note in Grandpa's notebook, tucked between circuit diagrams. "They took Quintech, but they can't take you," it read. The dated the day I was born. My throat tightened, his faith heavier than any threat. I coded faster, soldered tighter, driven by his words and their greed. SafePath grew, protecting hundreds, then thousands, across Chicago's elder homes. Each beep of a device felt like a heartbeat we'd saved. But I felt them watching, their lawyers circling, ready to strike. The garage wasn't just a workshop now, it was a battlefield, and I was ready. The city's hum pulsed outside, a reminder of what we'd built and what they wanted to tear down. Something was coming, bigger than a lawsuit, rooted in secrets I was only beginning to grasp. Stay with me to see how their plan unraveled and what I uncovered next. Subscribe now to catch the next chapter. This fight's about to ignite. The Chicago autumn painted the sky gray, a soft light filtering through our apartment's cracked window. Grandpa's chair sat empty, his favorite mug cold on the table beside it. He'd slipped away on a quiet Monday, his breath slowing in the dawn's gentle glow. I found him in his armchair, a faint smile etched on his face, like he'd made peace with the world. I held his hand, the silence heavier than any hospice machine. The hospice nurse arrived, her voice soft, saying he'd gone without pain, as if that could ease the ache in my chest. The funeral was small, held in a neighborhood church with peeling paint. Neighbors filled the pews, their faces lined with stories of Grandpa's kindness, our fixes, our safe path dream. I stood at the altar, clutching his notebook, its pages heavy with Quintex truth. My voice shook as I spoke of his life, his love, his unshakable belief in me. The service ended, and I thanked Mrs. Delgado, her eyes wet as she hugged me. Then I heard it, sharp heels clicking on the church's stone floor, a sound that turned my blood cold. My mother appeared, her coat too pristine for grief. My uncle and cousin followed, their faces tight, scanning the room like vultures circling a prize. My mother's arms opened, her smile thin as glass. "Novalie, we're here for him," she said, as if 7 years hadn't passed since they'd left him to die. I didn't move, my hands gripping the notebook tighter. My cousin stepped closer, his voice low. "Safe Path's doing well. We deserve a share." My stomach twisted, their greed laid bare in a house of mourning. I pointed to the chapel door, my voice steady despite the fire inside. "He's in there," I said. "Say your goodbyes, but don't expect anything else." They didn't flinch, their eyes already counting profits they hadn't earned. My mother's smile sharpened. "We're family, Novalie. His legacy belongs to us, too." I wanted to scream, to spill the truth of their betrayal, but I held back. The notebook in my hands held proof, a page I'd found just days before. Tucked between circuit sketches was a contract signed by my mother and uncle selling Quintex patents in 1985. Grandpa's signature was absent, his trust betrayed by their ink. I scanned it, sent it to our lawyer, a quiet man who'd helped us file Safe Paths patents. He'd promised it would matter when the time came. The funeral ended, and I lingered by the altar, folding donation slips for Safe Path's next clinic. My mother approached again, her voice honeyed. "Let's talk about the estate." I met her eyes, unflinching. "You left him to die," I said, each word a stone. "You don't get to claim him now." Her face hardened, but my cousin cut in. "We'll take Safe Path to court. You can't steal what's ours." I smiled, not out of joy, but certainty. "I found the contract," I said, watching their eyes widen just for a second. "You sold his life's work," I continued. "I have proof, notarized, ready for the world to see." Her lips parted, but no words came. My uncle clenched his fists, his silence louder than any threat. They left the church, their heels echoing like a retreating storm. I stood alone, the notebook a weight I was ready to carry. Grandpa's death wasn't the end. It was the spark for a fight I'd been preparing for. The truth of their theft, locked in that contract, was my weapon now. The city's pulse thrummed outside, a rhythm of loss and defiance. They thought they could claim his legacy, but I was ready to protect it. The law office smelled of polished oak and old paper, a quiet fortress in Chicago's clamor. I sat at the conference table, my hands steady on Grandpa's notebook, its pages a shield against what was coming. Mr. Carver placed a sealed envelope and a USB drive before me. My mother, uncle, and cousin filed in, their faces tight with expectation, like wolves scenting a kill. No one spoke, their silence a blade sharpened by greed. Mr. Carver cleared his throat, his voice calm. "This is Walter Quinn's last will, notarized last year." He nodded to me, and I plugged in the USB. Grandpa's face flickered onto a small screen, his eyes clear, his voice steady, filling the room with truth. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he began, his tone soft but unyielding. "But I need you to know who stayed and who walked away." My mother shifted, her heels clicking faintly. My cousin stared at the table, his smirk gone, replaced by a nervous twitch. "I leave everything, Safe Path, my savings, my home, to Novalie Quinn," Grandpa said. "She gave me 7 years, while you gave me silence." My uncle's jaw tightened, his voice cutting through. "This isn't legal. She manipulated him, a dying man with no clarity." Mr. Carver raised a hand, sliding a cognitive evaluation across the table. "Full mental capacity, confirmed 2 weeks before this recording." Then Grandpa's voice returned, sharper now, a blade of its own. I watched their faces pale, the contract I'd found burning in my memory. "I have proof," Grandpa said. "A signed contract, notarized, in Novalie's hands." My mother's eyes flicked to me, replacing her usual disdain. I pulled the contract from the notebook, holding it up, its ink a silent accusation. "You thought I forgot, but I rebuilt, and Novalie built with me. Safe Path is hers, born from love, not theft." Mr. Carver folded the will with precision. "No contest clause applies. Any challenge voids your claim entirely." My cousin stood, his chair scraping. "She's a kid, a nobody. You can't give her everything." Grandpa's voice answered, as if he'd known their words. "She's not a nobody. She's the only one who saw me." The room fell silent, the air heavy with their defeat. They left, my mother's heels slower now, her face a mask of shame she couldn't hide. I stayed, clutching the notebook, feeling Grandpa's presence in every word he'd left me. The will wasn't just money, it was his trust, his legacy, mine to carry. 6 months later, I stood in a community center, 3 laptops and a whiteboard behind me. The Quinn Foundation was born, named for the man who taught me to build, not break. We trained at-risk youth in coding, gave them tools to rewrite their futures. One girl, barely 16, debugged her first program and grinned. "I did it." That spark in her eyes was Grandpa's, alive again. I gave her his old soldering iron, saying, "You matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The foundation grew, opening a workshop where teens coded alongside seniors, building devices like SafePath. Each project was a bridge, connecting the abandoned to purpose. I kept Grandpa's chair, his mug, his notebook, winding his watch each morning like a vow. SafePath expanded, protecting thousands, a heartbeat of hope across the city. My family never called again, their silence louder than their threats. I didn't need their approval. I had his, etched in every choice I made. Wealth isn't money, but moments. 7 years of laughter, lessons, and love that no one could steal. The foundation wasn't just my work, it was our story, proof that staying matters. To anyone feeling left behind, know this: your worth isn't in what others see, but in what you build. Choose love, choose resilience, and you'll create a legacy that outlasts greed. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to catch more stories of heart and grit. You won't want to miss what's next.